Hey guys. No, I didn't quite do it right. 1 second. Shut up. Hey guys, this is how a French textile mill invented the computer. Wait, what? Now, when most people think of computers, they obviously don't think French textiles. But you know those Scantron forms that you used to fill out in school for those oh-so-delightful standardized tests? Well, it turns out that that piece of technology hasn't changed much in the past 200 years. But our story doesn't quite begin with a number 2 pencil and an entrance exam. Instead, French merchant Joseph-Marie Jacquard developed loom cards in the early 1800s. As the name suggests, they were used in mechanical textile looms, where instead of manually adjusting the loom for each row of a textile, these punch cards allowed the process to be automated. And back in the day, this was a big deal. Prior to Jacquard's loom cards, you needed 2 people to operate a loom, the weaver and a draw boy. Manual operation of a loom was time-consuming, error-prone, and generally a giant pain. A single tapestry could have dozens of layers, meaning that the loom would require hundreds or even thousands of individual adjustments during production. In fact, a weaver could only produce about 4 inches or 10 centimeters of a tapestry on a good day. But with the loom cards, the work could get done in just a fraction of the time. The weaver would insert cards into the loom that had strategic holes punched in them, almost like a series of 1s and 0s. Each hole corresponded to a hook, which was raised or lowered depending on whether the hole was punched. The user pressed down on a foot pedal to advance each plate, allowing continuous and intricate designs without any manual adjustment required. This made the process not only faster, but also more accurate. With that said, not everyone was impressed, as many unskilled workers, like draw boys, ended up getting laid off, helping to trigger the Luddite movement, comprised of folks who didn't care much for technology. They were actually responsible for destroying machines and for the death of at least 1 mill owner. But jumping ahead to 1837, programmable machines had expanded outside the realm of textiles as British mathematician Charles Babbage came up with the idea for an analytical engine to help the British Navy calculate routes. Like the Jacquard loom, it used punch cards, but the machine would interpret each hole position to read on or off, instead of moving a string up or down. Now, the analytical engine wasn't built before Babbage died, but his ideas heavily influenced what became the modern field of computer science. One example came to us from the 1890 US Census. You see, the previous census in 1880 had to deal with an overwhelming amount of data, which took about 8 years to compile. So technician Herman Hollerith thought there must be a better way. So he patented a machine that would read information off of punch cards. Again, this was based on the original Jacquard loom. Each card had 22 columns of 8 punched hole positions for a total of about 22 bytes of data each, a revolutionary amount at the time. Thanks to Hollerith's machine, the 1890 census was completed in only about 1 year. In fact, Hollerith went on to form the Tabulating Machine Company, which later became better known as IBM. Now, IBM originally stuck with that 22-column format for its cards, but they quickly realized that as their business customers needed to keep track of more and more data, a redesign was going to be necessary. Now, by 1928, IBM's tabulating machines were managing schedules, inventory, and freight around the world, so it was clear that a solution was just going to be needed. So the head of IBM at the time, Thomas Watson, yeah, the guy they named their supercomputer after, asked his engineers to come up with something. Now, the original idea was to keep the cards as they were, but make it possible for each punch to have 2 values. But they ultimately went with a redesigned 80-column card that didn't require as many upgrades to existing machines, as the cards were about the same size, but just with smaller holes. This 80-column card became known simply as the IBM card and was a standard for the next 60 years. In fact, even after IBM discontinued their punch cards in the 1960s, companies still regularly used the IBM card for decades. Now, of course, punch cards mostly disappeared in the 1990s. The IBM card only held about 80 bytes, so to put that in perspective, if you wanted to equal one 16 gigabyte SD card, you'd need 100,000 boxes of 2,000 punch cards each. But despite the fact that punch cards are a thing of the past, they had a huge impact on modern computing, and none of it would have been possible without good old Jacquard and that automated loom from 1801. And that is how a French mill invented the computer.